Okay guys, day 3 of this series on Fiji. Just came back from my morning run, so excuse the hair. We're just gonna get up and running quickly. We're gonna do exactly what I said we were gonna do in the previous video of this series. We're gonna get hands-on into the mathematical or statistical part of the game, and hopefully that's gonna give us an edge to make the correct decision when we start playing it in the next phase of the video. So I've got to be honest with you guys. So I said that I was gonna do two things. I said that I was generally gonna tackle the game from a mathematical perspective, and we're gonna do that. But I was hoping, when I started playing the game, I was hoping that I could do two things. I was hoping we could model our prior belief system, what essentially we need to be able to define if we want to play a conservative or aggressive strategy. That is the first part of the mathematical modeling that I wanted to do. And then what I wanted to do, or what I was hoping to do, is to model in some way the likelihood function. How do we update and adjust our strategy in the game itself, not in the pre-game phase where we have our cards in our hand and we evaluate how to play our game, like what strategy we're going to follow, but how we're going to adjust this strategy as we start observing trades happen in the game in real time. I kept playing a few more hands, and I started modeling the first phase, which is the pre-hand phase, the part where you come up with the strategy, and this is what we're going to talk about today. But I still haven't gotten into the likelihood function, like the way that we update our strategy. So we're going to put that on the side, and if anybody is interested in the game, in the series, and in helping me with this kind of stuff, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to work with anybody who would like to do so. But yeah, don't worry about it. It's gonna be pretty fun and exciting to get into the prior belief, into this first phase, the strategy definition. So yeah, stick with me in this video for that part. And now we're gonna change a little bit the vocabulary, because otherwise it's gonna be very confusing. This is just the words that I use here: prior belief and likelihood function. This was just what I used in the previous video to formalize the intuition that I had, which is that we want to have a prior belief so that we can come up with a strategy that we want to play with. And don't forget to just rewatch this video if you forgot about it. But we want to come up with this strategy, and then we want to update this strategy as we go. But now we're going to start talking about this first phase, the prior belief, the way that we come up with this strategy. And here it's going to be its whole thing. It's going to be its own thing, and we're going to have to get into a new vocabulary so that we can tackle this part successfully. So, what is this prior belief? How do we come up with a strategy to define how we're going to play? The way we're going to do that, and intuitively, if you know a little bit of statistics, it should resonate to with what you know already. We're going to try to estimate, thanks to Bayes' rule or Bayes' theorem or Bayesian inferences in general. We're going to try to estimate what is the probability that one of the suit that we have in our hand is the target suit. And remember, that's the whole point of the game, because if you manage to estimate this probability somewhat more precisely than your opponents, you're just more likely to get on the hunt for this goal suit, for this target suit. You're more likely to pay the right price for it, to pay a premium when you don't have a lot of it, to pay a discount when you have a lot of them. So you're just more likely to be on the right hunt for this goal suit. And that's what's going to give you an edge at the end of the day when you start engaging in the trading itself. As we saw last time, if you have a pretty conservative strategy, you have a pretty conservative game, you just want to basically trade on arbitrage, and you just want to make some money by doing some quick small trades. You don't really want to hunt the target suit. But when you have a very skewed hand, you do want to hunt the suit. So the question now is, can we leverage Bayesian inferences to come up with a more precise estimate of what our goal suit is? And stick with me, we're going to write a little bit of code here. So if you're not familiar with code or anything, don't forget, just go ahead and watch coding tutorials. You can get into Python. You can even follow this course that I built, but this is more advanced. It's really a course about more advanced machine learning engineering. It assumes that you already have some knowledge of Python and data science, so it's not great for beginners. Watch any beginning course on Python, and it's going to help you to follow this tutorial today. But essentially, what we're going to do now is we're going to model these probabilities. And the way we're going to model and estimate these probabilities is we're first going to lay out the foundations of the game. We know that there is 4 suits, and that any suit is as likely at first to be the target suit. This is just the way that it is. You essentially give a bunch of cards you essentially pick a random deck from the game, and this is, remember, don't forget to check out how the game works. But you essentially pick a random deck, so you don't know what the target suit is. So any suit is just as likely to be the target suit as you begin the game. You have 40 cards in your hand. You have 40 cards in the deck. You have 10 cards in your hand, and you know that there is 12 cards in the common suit. The common suit is the one that you need to figure out, so that you can figure out what is the target suit, the opposite suit to the common suit. That's going to be needed for later. So we are going to have one of the uncommon suit is going to be one of the suits that has 10 cards as well. And so the remaining cards, like how many cards you have in the game left when you remove the common suit, is going to be these remaining cards. And the theoretical remaining card is going to be something that we come back to, so don't worry about it too much. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is a simple modeling of these probabilities. What do I mean by simple? Well, I'm going to answer this simple question. Given the numbers of spades that I can observe in my hand, what is the probability that spade is the common suit? So this is the final formalization of the intuition we've had all along in this game, which is that when you observe more spades in your hand, you're just more likely to have spade as a common suit because there's just more spades available globally in the game. So if I have 10 spades in my hand, to kind of play with extremes here, if I have 10 spades in my hand, it's extremely likely that I have the common suit. Whereas if I have 0 spades in my hand, it's just very unlikely that, given that spade is the most common suit that there is, that it actually is the common suit right now. So that's what I'm going to try to model here. I'm going to try to figure out, given how many spades I have in my hand, what is the likeliness of having spade as the common suit. And the way I'm going to do that is by applying the Bayesian theorem straight away. So if you remember the Bayesian theorem or Bayes rule, essentially it might be actually easier to see it through the formula. I put here a good reminder of how the Bayesian rule or the Bayesian theorem works in practice. This is a fantastic explanation by Grant Sanderson on his channel 3 Blue 1 Brown. I put the link to the video if you want to check it out. I'm also going to upload all the code on GitHub so you can have access to it. But essentially, we can figure out how the Bayesian theorem works thanks to the formula. The probability of seeing an hypothesis, an event A, being true given some data that we observe is essentially the probability of seeing this data given the hypothesis times the probability of the hypothesis, so the prior essentially that you have, divided by let's call it a normalization factor, like something that allows you to scale back the probabilities between 0 and 1. It's going to get more clear as we get into it. But that's exactly what we want to do here. We want to model our probability. We want to model our probabilities of spade being the common suit. This is going to be our hypothesis here. The hypothesis is that spade is the common suit, and we're going to want to come up with the estimate given that we have X amount of spades. This is our data, this is our observations. Given that we have X amount of spades in our hand, what is the likelihood, like what is the probability that we have spade as the common suit? And again, if you know that spade is the common suit, then you know that club is the opposite, it's the target suit. So we're just going to go ahead and for every observation that we have from a range of 0 to 11, this is essentially saying like, okay, we're going to want to know this, estimate these probabilities if I have 1 spade, 2 spades, 3 spades, 10 spades in my hand. So we're going to iterate on that, and we're going to compute for all of these observations. We're going to see, okay, what is the remaining hand that I have? The remaining hand, so the let's say like the number of available cards that there is in this hand when I remove the observation is going to be the remaining hand. And what I'm going to need to be able to compute these probabilities is first I'm going to need to know all of the possible hands that there is. What are all of the combinations that I could come up with for the hand that I have? My hand is essentially it's essentially 10 cards. It's essentially 40 cards, and it's essentially 10 cards that I pick out of these 40 cards. This is a combination problem. This is how this is kind of like, it's called 40 pick 10. You want to find all of the ways that you can get 10 hands in a set of 40 cards that are available at the starting of the game. And so that's going to be the total number of hands that I have. Now, the next step is going to be the ways to get the observation if spade is the common suit. And that's going to be kind of like the observation given the fact that spade is the common suit. So that's going to be the combination of the observation. So how many times you can get a spade out of the common cards that you have, how many cards that you can get a spade, times the combination, the combinatory of how many times you can get the remaining hands, so what's basically not the observation, out of the remaining cards, out of all of the cards minus the cards that are assigned to the common. And so that's going to be the ways that we can obtain X observations of spades as common cards. And then we're going to want to find the ways to get observation spades if spades has 10 cards. So that's a little bit more tricky. I'm going to get to that in a second so that I can explain the rest. That's just going to be a normalization factors. So I'm going to skip this, and I'm just going to go ahead in Bayes' theorem. What we need for the Bayesian theorem is basically what we were seeing here. We essentially need to get our prior. The prior is pretty simple. The prior is simply the 25% probability of having spade as a starting suit. And then we're going to weight this prior. This is the whole point of the Bayesian theorem. The Bayesian theorem helps us figure out how to update our belief in light of new evidence. But what is this new evidence? Well, the likelihood function is essentially the ways that we can obtain that many observations given that spade is the common suit. This is what we computed here. It's the combinations that we have described earlier. So this is the way that we can obtain that many spades given that spade is the common suit. It's our probability of the data given the hypothesis divided by the total number of hands, so that you can weight that down and you can create basically a likelihood of occurrence. You can create like a probability of getting this. And that is our likelihood function. This is how we're going to update our prior. And then we're going to scale that. So we're going to scale that update by the normalization factor. And the normalization factor is essentially this chunk here. the normalization factor is the the probability of observing spades, right? The probability of observing spade is essentially what we've just described here. It's the probability of observing that many spades, given that spade is the common suit, and that is our likelihood, weighted by our prior, essentially. So this is the case where spade is actually the common suit. And then we're going to take the opposite, the other side of the thing. And that's exactly why you normalize that. That's how you normalize the whole thing. You take the other, the counterfactual, essentially. You take what is not your prior and you weight basically the likelihood of spade, of having that many spade in your observation, given the anti-hypothesis, given the fact that spade is not the common suit. That's the opposite of the hypothesis, times the opposite of the prior. And that is kind of like the other set of possibilities that you have. And so this whole thing is essentially the probability of observing a spade, like the number of spade that we have here. And remember, we iterate on all of the spade observations that we could have. And then we essentially have this final normalization factor included into our equation here, so that we can get our probability of spade, of having that probability of having spade as the common suit, this being our hypothesis, given the observations that we have, given the fact that we've observed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spades observation. And this is exactly the probability estimate that we want. So we're just going to keep that estimate probability. We're gonna round it by a factor of 2, and we're going to store it and associate it with the number of observations that we have. And why are we going to do that? Because that's exactly what's going to be very useful to help us play this game. We're going to be able to see this graph here. I just basically ran the whole thing. I stored all of the observations, and then I started plotting the whole thing. And this is exactly what we want. We want to see the probability of spades being the common suit, given the number of spades that we have in our hand. So we see here on the x-axis, we see how many we see how many spades we have in our hand, and we're going to see on the y-axis the probability of spade being the common suit. And why is this so useful? Well, this is extremely useful because I've been in a situation where I had, for instance, seven spades. Actually, I had 7 clubs, but the argument is the same. It holds in the same way. I had 7 clubs in my hand, essentially as the starting hand, and that's here. And I wanted to know, okay, given the fact that I have 7 clubs, what was the likelihood that clubs was the common suit? And I made a informal, intuitive reasoning that it was just likely that spade would be the common suit, the target suit, given that I had 7 clubs in my hand. Remember, given that I had 7 clubs in my hand, I basically said that it was likely that clubs was the common suit, and therefore that spade was the target suit. Well, now the cool thing is that we can precisely estimate these probabilities, and we can say, you know what, if I really have 7 clubs in my hand, I can say that there is a 64% chance that clubs is my common suit, and therefore that spade is my target suit. Don't get confused by the fact that I just switched common and target, because I just wanted to connect it to the hand that we've seen at the very beginning of the series. But this is exactly what this graph does for you. So this is very, very useful. Why is it that when I observe 10 spades, I cannot ascertain for sure? There is still a 4% chance probability that spade is not the common suit. Well, if I just have 10 spades in my hand, I essentially have still the possibility that spade is the suit that has 10 cards in total. It's very unlikely, but it is possible. If I don't have any spades in my hand, I still have a 13% chance probabilities of spade being the common suit. So the sweet spot is kind of like here. If I have already more than 6 spades in my hand, I already start the game with a prior belief that club is going to be the target suit. And this is exactly what we wanted. We want to know where is this sweet spot, because we want to know when we want to start playing an aggressive strategy. And I would argue that with 6 to 7 suits in your hand, you can start playing aggressive at this game. With fewer than that, with 4 to 5, it's kind of like not the best strategy, but it could be done sometimes. And with fewer, like with a much more balanced game, remember, with our more balanced game where we have like 3 or 2 of these suits in our hand, this is definitely where you don't want to play a very aggressive game. This is definitely where you want to play a relaxed, more arbitrage-driven game where you don't have to spend too much energy trying to get your target suit at a premium. So this graph is going to be very valuable, and we're going to use it to play our next rounds. I just want to show you, like, I'm not going to get too much into the details of the code here. It's more or less the same methodology, just slightly different, so I try to structure the code in the same way. But I wanted to show you, if we want to go one step further, and we want to see what is the estimated probability of having spade as the common suit, given 2 facts now. Given the fact that I have spade as a, that I have 4 spades in my hand, and given the fact that I have X hearts in my hand as well. And so this one is going to be very useful too, right? Because it's going to allow us to go one step further. If I have 7 clubs in my hand, but I have 3 hearts in my hand, it's probably going to be another probability than if I have 7 and then the rest of them distributed evenly across all of the remaining suits. This is the logic that I wanted to explore here in this next step. So I'm going to compute the probability that I have spade as the common suit, given that I have 4 of them. And remember, if I have 4 spades in my hand, the simple version of this computation tells me that I have a 33% chance of having spade as the common suit. But now I'm going to adjust this by the extra evidence that I have some hearts in my hand. And if I have 4 spades in my hand, I can only have, well, basically hands minus spade in my hand. So I can only have 6 heart maximum in my hand. So I'm going to run the same computation here, and I'm going to plot this, and I'm going to look at the result. And it's going to be interesting to see that, I'm actually going to plot it with 6. Remember, 6 is the sweet spot where I have 50% chance of knowing what the target suit is. And so, given that I have 6 spades in my hand, how does this probability, 52%, adjust based on the number of hearts that I have? The interesting thing is that this 52% can adjust from 48% up to 59% chance, depending on how many hearts I have in my hand. An interesting thing to see is that the more hearts I have in my hand, the more it strengthened my belief that spade is the common suit. So the probability of spade being the common suit for a given number of spade in my hand increases monotonously with the number of hearts that I have in my hand as well. If I have very, very few hearts, or if it's like pretty much like distributed evenly with the other suit, it doesn't really adjust my prior probability of having spade as the common suit. So that's pretty interesting to observe. If I actually have somewhere around 4 suits, well, again, like the whole thing adjusts pretty steeply. You have as little as 27% chance of having your spade as your probability, and as much as 44% chance of having spade as your common suit, given the variation of how many hearts you have in your hand. So we're going to use these tables for the next rounds of Fiji that we're going to play, and hopefully this is going to give us the edge that we need to play our initial strategies properly and start making money in the right way, either by chasing the common suit, the target suit, or by playing on arbitrage and just trying to do like small trades that are profitable.